A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Dr. Sanak Mishra, President, Indian National Academy of Engineering, we extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the inaugural session of INAE Annual Convention 2020 being held online for the very first time. May I request Dr. Sanak Mishra, President INAE, Professor Indranil Manna, Vice President INAE, Dr. Purnendu Ghosh, Vice President INAE, Dr. Pradeep, Vice President INAE, Professor K. Bhanu Sankara Rao, Chief Editor of Publications INAE, Lieutenant Colonel Shobhit Rai, Retired, Deputy Executive Director INAE, to please come to the dais. It is also my pleasure to welcome the Chief Guest, Mr. T.V. Narendran, CEO and Managing Director, Tata Steel Limited, who joins us virtually from Mumbai. I now request all dignitaries on the dais to please light the lamp. आइए चलते हैं धरती से आकाश की तरफ, प्राणी से परमात्मा की तरफ, पदार्थ से सूक्ष्म की ओर, अज्ञान से ज्ञान की ओर, अंधकार से प्रकाश की ओर। दीप प्रज्वलन हमारी संस्कृति का एक अहम हिस्सा है। Ladies and gentlemen, we are lighting the auspicious lamp. Thank you, sir. It is my pleasure to give a brief introduction of Dr. Sanak Mishra. President INA is an icon of the Indian steel industry and is acclaimed as a brilliant scientist and metallurgist. He has held the appointments of Managing Director Rourkela Steel Plant, Director Steel Authority of India Limited, Vice President and CEO India Projects ArcelorMittal, and Secretary General Indian Steel Association. He obtained his BE degree in metallurgy from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and his MS and PhD degrees in metallurgical engineering from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA. In 1980, he had received the prestigious Alexander von Humboldt Fellowship and spent 2 years as visiting scientist at Aachen Technical University, Germany. He is a recipient of several prestigious awards such as Centenary Year Distinguished Alumni Award from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in the year 2008 and the Distinguished Alumnus Award from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the year 2010. He was also conferred the National Metallurgist Award by Ministry of Steel, Government of India, JRD Tata Award for Excellence in Corporate Leadership in Metallurgical Industries, and the Platinum Medal of the Indian Institute of Metals. Dr. Mishra was the President of the Indian Institute of Metals during the year 2009-2010. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from Ministry of Steel for the year 2018. May I request Dr. Sanak Mishra, President INAE, to please deliver the presidential address.
Good morning, Mr. T.V. Narendran, our distinguished chief guest, Professor Indranil Manna, Dr. Purnendu Ghosh, and Dr. Pradeep, the 3 vice presidents of INA, Professor K. Bhanu Sankara Rao, Chief Editor of Publications, esteemed fellows of INA, awardees, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Indian National Academy of Engineering, I welcome you all to the INAE Annual Convention being held online for the first time due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which limits, unfortunately, the possibility of a physical gathering. The virtual platform for conduct of meetings and events, both official and unofficial, has become the new normal. Citizens from across nations have become accustomed to the contemporary paradigm of online meetings, having realized the importance of conducting the daily business and adhering to official calendars and schedules. With this in the background, the INA Annual Convention 2020 was planned to be held online. I extend a very warm welcome once again to all colleagues and delegates to this landmark event, which will be chronicled, I think, in the history of INA for its uniqueness in the mode of conduct. At this junction, for those of you who are not familiar with INA, I would like to give a brief introduction of the Academy. The Indian National Academy of Engineering, established in 1987 as a society under the Societies Registration Act, is an autonomous professional body. It is supported partly through grant in aid by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. It is in fact the only engineering academy in the country and comprises India's most distinguished engineers, engineer scientists and technologists, covering the entire spectrum of engineering disciplines. INA provides a forum for futuristic planning for the country's development requiring engineering and technological inputs. Presently, INA has 883 fellows and 88 foreign fellows on its rolls, who are grouped in 10 engineering sections, demarcated on the basis of their engineering disciplines and fields of specialization. Since the raising of the Academy, INA has experienced an increase in its visibility in the national engineering domain. In the recent past, INA is recognized as an advisory body to the government departments and agencies for providing inputs for engineering interventions to help solve problems on topics of current and contemporary engineering interest and in the framing of national policies on identified critical areas. INA has embarked on a journey of progress over the decades with the institution of novel flagship events and activities encompassing all aspects and fields of engineering and technology. INA launched an annual mega event of engineers, the so-called Engineers Conclave, in the year 2013, which is organized jointly with major engineering organizations on rotation basis, with the objective of providing a platform for engineers from all allied fields to meet, deliberate, and recommend the right engineering solutions to some of the pertinent issues of national importance. The 7th Engineering Conclave 2019 was organized jointly with Bharat Electronics Limited in September 2019 at the BEL Academy of Excellence in Bangalore, and the two themes of this conclave were Defense Technology and Innovation and Transformation of Rural India using Digital Technologies. The conclave was graced by the Chief Guest, the Honorable Raksha Mantri, Sri Rajnath Singh. Actionable recommendations based on the deliberations in terms of engineering interventions are being actively pursued with the concerned government departments. It's a matter of pride for the Academy that our initiatives to provide inputs for the development of indigenous regional transport aircraft or RTA has since been approved by the PMO, and the proposal for constituting a special purpose vehicle as recommended by INA is being progressed with the Ministry of Civil Aviation. In this regard, an INA delegation met with the Honorable Minister of Civil Aviation, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, on January 14, 2020 at New Delhi and made a presentation of the recommendations on the development of regional transport aircraft in the country. This had emanated from the deliberations of various high-level meetings, including the Engineers Conclave 2017 at Bangalore. This is by far one of the most path-breaking achievements of INA that has been recognized at the national level. A round-table interaction meeting of domain experts on the role of hydrogen in India's energy strategy was held at Pune on February 15 in the year 2020. The deliberations focused on current and future Indian and global scenarios on hydrogen as an energy source with respect to technologies and also economics. INA undertook a research study project entitled A Pilot Project on Safe Laboratory Practices and Laboratory Waste Disposal, and a report on the proposed pilot project was submitted to the Secretary of Department of Science and Technology on February 5, 2020 for consideration. In 2020, the INA also has instituted and invited nominations for a new award named INA Woman Engineer of the Year Award in order to recognize and promote meritorious contributions of women in engineering profession, leading to breakthrough innovations and disruptive changes for the benefit of people. One awardee was selected in each of the three categories, that is academia, R&D and industry, for conferment of the subject award. It is worth mentioning that I conveyed INA's commitment to the Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister to extend all and any support required by the government for the furtherance of its pertinent initiatives for the containment and eradication of the COVID-19 pandemic. Subsequently, the names of INA Fellows and young associates willing to contribute to the initiatives of the Department of Science and Technology in this direction was forwarded to DST. In addition, a special issue of the Transactions of the Indian National Academy of Engineering was brought out in June 2020 on Technologies for Fighting COVID-19. The transaction was published by Springer and was actually instituted in the current year as an international journal of engineering and technology. It provides a platform for collating appropriate technologies and for bringing the innovators and the industries together to ensure successful translation of the technologies into practice for the benefit of the citizens, and the issue is available on Springer website in open domain for the benefit of researchers and readers from across the globe, not just India. 6 nominees were selected this year by INA for the conferment of the Abdul Kalam Technology Innovation National Fellowship for the year 2020-21. The fellowship has been introduced and established by SARB, that is the Science and Engineering Research Board, at the initiative of the Department of Science and Technology. In today's world, the digital mode is assuming greater importance day by day. In this regard, a digital platform for INA was created to facilitate INA Fellows submitting nominations online for the fellowship schemes and awards, and for improved functioning and digitizing of operations of the INA headquarters. This year, the nominations were invited online for the fellowship, which received an overwhelming response. The review of the carried forward and the new nominations by INA Fellows was also conducted online for the first time through login facility provided to INA Fellows on the digital platform. The entire process of scrutiny of nominations was done through the digital platform, and the first meetings of the sectional committee were held online through WebEx to shortlist the nominations for peer review prior to the second meeting of the sectional committees. The fellowship module was successfully deployed for the first time to facilitate online submission, review and scrutiny and selection of nominations. INA launched a webinar series in the year 2020 on topics encompassing all sectors and disciplines of engineering and technology. 3 webinars have been held so far on the topics launch of INA webinar series. 1. Does hydrogen have a role in India's energy strategy? And strategy for accelerated growth of renewable energy application in India, featuring talks by INA fellows and eminent experts of the country. Several other webinars were also organized by the local chapters of INA and topics such as 700 megawatt electric Indian pressurized heavy water reactor, enriching engineering education through experimental, collaborative and social learning, artificial intelligence and ethics, hypothetico-deductive construction of new knowledge in industrial R&D and academic research, and S&T contribution of the Bangalore region to the national efforts against COVID-19, etc. The book, The Mind of an Engineer, Volume 2, published by Springer Nature, has been brought out by INA as the second book of the series in an initiative to document interesting autobiographical articles by INA fellows on their career paths and life journeys that have led to their success as eminent engineering professionals. INA also prepared a white paper on technological preparedness for dealing with national disruptions, which was forwarded to Niti Aayog, the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, and to the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. In response to this initiative, Niti Aayog convened a meeting through video conferencing on 10th August 2020 to discuss the future course of action to implement the recommendations of the white paper, with a view to take the initiative forward. On the advice of Niti Aayog, a peer committee has been constituted in November 2020 with representatives from DST, CSIR, ICMR, DAE, Coast Guard, DRDO, etc. to formulate a set of implementable actions. The first meeting of the committee was held on November 30, 2020. INA happens to be a member academy of the International Council of Academies of Engineering and Technological Sciences and participates in its programs and convocations of global concern for the benefit of at international and national levels. This year, the National Academy of Engineering Korea hosted CATES, the annual meeting and symposium on Engineering, a Better World, Smart Society, held online from October 12 to 15. Since physical meetings were not possible due to the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, INA had been invited to participate in various committees and nominate theme-based speakers for participation in the symposium. Nominated fellows of the INA participated in various meetings held during the event, such as the CATES Energy Committee, CATES Sustainability Development Goals, CATES Working Group on Diversity, CATES COVID-19 Special Committee, technical session of the CATES 2020 Symposium on Climate Change Issues and Challenges in an Urban Environment. In the recent past, INA had established joint consultative committees with the Department of Science and Technology and with the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister at the highest level. During 2020, 2 additional consultative committees were established, one with DRDO and the other with CSIR. These consultative committees help INA to learn of and comprehend the national policies and programs of the Government of India and then align its activities so as to be able to make a contribution in terms of providing engineering inputs to various government agencies. One of the major activities of INA is to give recognition to the outstanding contributions by engineers from the highest level to the youngest graduates, for which several awards have been instituted by the Academy. During the grand award function this afternoon, we are going to honor the Lifetime Contribution Awardees in Engineering, Professor Jayakrishna and Professor S.N. Mitra Memorial Awardees, Outstanding Teachers Awardees, Woman Engineer of the Year Awardees, Young Engineer Awardees, Young Entrepreneur Awardees, and Innovative Student Projects Awardees. They shall be felicitated and the awards conferred on them. The induction ceremony and the annual general meeting of the fellows will be held tomorrow, and we look forward to maximum participation of fellows and young associates in these important sessions. It is my firm belief that the fellows and the young associates are the backbone of the Academy and represent the pool of engineering talent of the nation. I am delighted to bring to your attention the enthusiasm shown by the esteemed fellowship and young associates who have unwaveringly offered their full support at every instance during the period of the lockdown commencing March 2020. Their support has helped sustain all technical activities and programs, including selection of fellows and awardees, in a timely manner and with equal efficiency as before. I also place on record my sincere appreciation for the INA staff who worked with full commitment during the lockdown from their respective homes and resumed physical attendance at INA office immediately upon receiving clearance from the government. They really held the flag of INA very high. I must add that none of the activities of INA could have been accomplished without the significant contributions by the office bearers of the Academy and the esteemed Governing Council, who despite their urgent official arrangements and engagements left no stone unturned in taking each task of the Academy to completion with grand success. Our former INA presidents Dr. B.N. Suresh and Dr. P.S. Goel deserve special mention for their constant support and guidance. With the vision of the betterment of our society and the fulfillment of the aspirations of our people, I have no doubt that INA Collective will contribute in a unique manner to the common goals of sustainable economic growth and promotion of health and well-being for the people of India. I conclude my presidential address wishing all the best to all of you and your family members for the upcoming New Year 2021. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
May I request Dr. Sanak Mishra, President INAE, to please give a brief introduction of the chief guest, Mr. T.V. Narendran, and invite him to deliver the inaugural address.
It's my pleasant duty to introduce the chief guest of the inaugural session of the INA Annual Convention year 2020. Mr. T.V. Narendran, Fellow of the National Academy of Engineering, CEO and Managing Director, Tata Steel Limited, Mumbai. Mr. Narendran has over 30 years of experience in the mining and metals industry. He is currently on the board of the Tata Steel Limited. He is chairman of the Tata Steel Europe, Tata Steel BSL Limited, Tata Steel Long Products Limited, and the board of governors of XLRI Jamshedpur. He is a member on the board of the World Steel Association and a member of its executive committee. He was the co-chair of the Mining and Metals Governors Council of the World Economic Forum from 2016 to 2018. Mr. Narendran is a mechanical engineer from the National Institute of Technology, Trichy, and completed MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, IIM, Calcutta. He is a recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Awards from both NIT Trichy and IIM Calcutta. He is a Chevening Scholar and also has attended the Advanced Management Program in Fontainebleau, France. Mr. Narendran is President Designate CII, and also the President Designate of the Indian Institute of Metals. I take great pleasure in inviting Mr. T.V. Narendran to deliver the inaugural address on the topic of engineering innovations in the industry.
Thank you so much. My privilege to be here with all of you today virtually, if not physically. So Dr. Sanak Mishra, the President INAE, Professor Indranil Manna, the Vice President INAE, Professor Purnendu Ghosh, Vice President INAE, Dr. Pradeep, Vice President INAE, Professor Bhanu Sankara Rao, Chief Editor, Publications INAE, Lieutenant Colonel Shobit Rai, Deputy Executive Director INAE. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, thank you once again for inviting me. It's my privilege to be here for this occasion. And INAE, as we heard from Dr. Sanak Mishra, is doing a lot of wonderful work, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do this good work as we go along. The topic which has been selected for my theme, just give me a minute while the slide changes. Yeah, sorry. So the topic which has been selected for today's lecture is on engineering innovations in industry, and I think it's a very, very important topic at the phase of development that we are in as a country, as we move more and more into a knowledge driven world. You know, even if you look at organizations, industries, countries, IP, intellectual property, is becoming more and more important. And today's geopolitical issues between countries are driven more by IP issues than by trade issues. You know, while trade issues are important, increasingly it's a knowledge-driven and technology-driven world out there. And even if you look at the valuations of companies today, it's the more knowledge-intensive companies and the IP-intensive companies who generate more value in the stock markets than capital-intensive and traditional companies. So there is a need for us to value and nurture knowledge as much as we've done in the past, if not much more. So I'm happy to talk on this topic, though I would prefer to talk on steel industry because that's an industry that I know. I'll take examples from this industry to illustrate my points, and then come towards the end to what I think INAE can do to help create this ecosystem or to help encourage engineering in the innovations in industry in the country. So if I look at the steel industry, and if I look at four big challenges that the industry has been facing over the decades, continues to face even as we speak, so there are challenges that can come from the marketplace, from the production chain, from the supply chain, and from the external ecosystem. And I just want to focus on four areas, as I said, and four major challenges that the industry has been dealing with, and I'll talk about it in more detail in the subsequent slides. One is, how can we better utilize low-grade raw materials or drive greater resource efficiency? I think in a world which is more and more conscious about the footprint that we leave in the ecosystem, this becomes very important. In the context of India and steel making, how can we make better use of the raw materials that we have? We may have high-quality iron ore, but we don't have great quality coal for steel making, at least. How can we drive greater process efficiency? It's a brutal world out there. You need to compete with competing metals, competing materials. Consumer industries are getting disrupted, so process efficiency needs to factor that in. How do you drive product differentiation through innovations? And that again is very important. For metals, we are often called a commodity because the prices go up and down. But that's oversimplifying the relationship we have with our customers. It's not as if customers buy purely on price. So all steel companies, metal companies try and get into that segment of customers who are conscious of quality and technology and are willing to pay you a premium or willing to pay you a more or less volatile price in a very volatile environment. So product differentiation is key as well. And that's how you also separate yourself from competitors, competing materials, competing metals, and also competing players in the same industry. And of course, the environmental footprint of this industry is big. It's a big issue which we are having to deal with. Steel and cement are seen as hard to abate sectors. despite tremendous improvement in our footprint, in the sense that if I look at the carbon emission of the industry per ton of steel, it has improved significantly in India, globally over the last 10, 15 years. But given that the consumption of steel is expected to grow as China develops further, India continues to develop, and more than 1 billion people in Africa move from being underdeveloped to developed, the efficiencies that are driven in the carbon footprint of steel will be more than offset by the increased volume of steel that will need to be produced to cater to the needs of all these populations. And so, how do you deal with the challenges of environment, even as you deal with the need to produce more steel, is to me a key point. So if you go back in history and if you look at the process efficiency part of the 4 challenges that I talked about, till 1850s, the most common form of ferrous material was wrought iron, and it was hammered into form and strengthened by inclusions. And the process made the material very expensive. At that point in time, it was about 50 pounds a ton, but which is in today's terms, it's about 3,500 pounds per ton. This is, just now the steel prices are high, but if you look at steel prices today, in one of the Indian Institute of Metal lectures, we had Professor Sadoway from MIT put it very, in a very articulate way when he said that you're converting dirt to metal for less than 50 cents a kilo. So that's pretty much how much of efficiency has been driven. So we started at 3,500 pounds per ton at today's money, and this was okay for small items. So it was not really good enough for large industrial applications at that time because it was too expensive. But then war brought a necessity, and the Crimean War of the 1850s demanded cannons and cannonballs, and a new technology, the Bessemer technology, came in, and it was basically to take molten iron and reduce its carbon by blowing air through it. And certainly that changed the whole cycle, in terms of the production cycle, the cost efficiencies, and the process needed no extra heating and was therefore much cheaper. So as a consequence, the cost of making steel came down to, at that time, 50 pounds per ton became 10 pounds a ton. So it's basically 20% of what it was because of process innovation, and again helped the growing consumption of steel, and the Bessemer converter technology flourished for about another 40 years after that. So this is an example of how process efficiency can drive usage and also kind of, in some sense, leverage an opportunity created by externalities. So the Bessemer converter technology was adopted in the US to produce rails for the expanding rail network in the US. That's a big story if you read about the history of the United States, of how the move to the west from the east was enabled, by the railways, and how this great railway building exercise went on both from the west coast and the east coast to meet in the middle. And so again, all that was possible because of mass production and continuous improvement continue to bring down the cost of production. And in England, the Bessemer company also proudly advertised a ability to produce ordnance. So when you look at the different cycles that have been used in steel making, you will see different cycles go up and down as new process routes come in. And again, it's also driven by externalities because in the 1890s, the Boer Wars demanded higher performance from the cannons, and the Bessemer converter used to blow air into the liquid pig iron. The nitrogen content of the steel thus increased, and this caused brittleness, thus limiting the performance of the steels. So pure oxygen would be the solution, but was not available in commercial quantities. And in the 1890s, eventually the Bessemer converter died, and a version of it remained called the Bessemer-Thomas process. But again, an example of how the customer demands kept changing. The situation brought its own demands. The process efficiency kept getting driven, and more and more options were found. And so even this Bessemer-Thomas process, if I go back to that, they used basic refractories, so they were able to use high phosphorus ones. And the graph on the right here basically shows, like I said, the rise and fall of different steelmaking technologies. And beyond 1915, oxygen had become commercially available at a reasonable price. And this made a Bessemer-like converter, the Linz-Donowitz converter in the steel industries called the LD converter, the technology choice. And going forward, further changes in the dominant steel making process will continue to happen. As we look forward to a more carbon efficient way of steel making, Tata Steel itself is doing a lot of work. Many other companies are doing a lot of work. And of course, Dr. Sanak Mishra talked about hydrogen, and that's going to play a very important role in steel making as well, as people find ways to substitute the role of coal as a reductant with hydrogen, as long as it's available in plenty and cheap. The same thing as when oxygen was not available, you used a certain process. When oxygen is available, cheap and plenty, you use it more actively in the process. Similarly, if green hydrogen is available in plenty, that will create a lot more opportunities to drive more carbon efficient steelmaking. So over the last 170 years, externalities have shaped the choice of technologies, and the need for product properties and volumes have forced certain technologies to rule. And as the demands change, the existing technologies, however popular, made way for new and more appropriate ones. And that's how the metal continues to be relevant. And depending on what you look at, 25 to 30 times more steel is used in the world today than the most commonly used metal, which is next most commonly used metal, which is aluminum. So process restrictions that come in the way of meeting the demand, market demand, also result in innovation cycles. Necessity also drives innovation. And this is extremely important to bear in mind as we face a world today where these changes in the ecosystem are happening at a faster rate. So, there could be other industries which look at these cycles and say the innovation is too far and few in between, So we really need to think about the pace at which the world is changing around us, the challenges that are coming to us, and then how can we accelerate the pace of innovation and not be limited by the pace of innovation in the past, however material they have been. So when I move to the next challenge that we referred to in the earlier slide, it's on product differentiation and how has the steel industry responded to this challenge. So sometime back, I think in the early 90s, when aluminum was making a lot of inroads, seen as a lighter metal, auto companies were thinking of using more and more of it. The World Steel Association formed a consortium of about 33 steel companies who were serving the auto industry, and one tier one supplier and one automotive company to find out ways to address this threat. And 3 successive large programs were run to develop advanced and ultra high strength formable steel. And the application technologies such as tailor welded joints, hydroforming were also developed. So this was an example of a cross industry collaboration, also involving a customer and a component producer. So it was a horizontal collaboration and a vertical collaboration to find solutions. I mean, the steel industry realized that the best way to ensure the relevance of steel is to make sure less steel is used in a car. So it may seem a bit counterintuitive, but that's the best way you can ensure the future. If you insist on not doing that work, you will become irrelevant. So a lot of work was done, and what was called the Ultralight Steel Auto Body Initiative, which is called the ULSAB program. Then you had the Advanced Vehicle Concept, and then you had the Future Steel Vehicle Concept. And each of these progressively looked at using stronger, lighter steels and driving efficiencies in the use of steel. Even today, many companies who service the auto industry, including Tata Steel, do VAV work with customers, value analysis and value engineering work with customers. We sit and take apart a model and say, how can we use less steel in that model? And even if you can save 10 kilos, 15 kilos, that makes a lot of difference. So there are many, many ways in which we need to work. We need to be conscious about the demands of our customers, the challenges they face in their markets, and how can we work with them to find value or create value. And oftentimes in these conversations, it's more the technology people, the engineers, the R&D people who sit and discuss. We don't involve the commercial people in the conversation because we don't want the commercial dimension to override what should be a good technical solution. So this is again a way of doing product differentiation using innovation and engineering capability. And this is just as an illustration. When you even look at Tata Motors vehicle, which is typically an India designed, India made vehicle, you can see in India 3 successive models in recent years from Tata Motors. As you see, the increasing share of advanced high strength steels has increased from 8% to 28%, and even hot stamping grades have been introduced. And this is just an illustration. And if you look at most models or most cars over the years, you will see this kind of a trend being demonstrated. And this is the outcome of work being done by the steel industry and the auto industry to find differentiated products. So again, if you look at this area, continuous innovation is leading to experimentation with also mixed materials. We are also trying out a combination of glass fiber reinforced composite materials together with advanced high strength steel to create a lighter and cheaper side impact bar, for example. And the future car body, we believe, is more and more multi-material. Even in Tata Steel, Dr. Devashish Bhattacharya, who heads our R&D and technology, is also heading our new materials business, because we are saying that obviously we will try and make the best steels and develop new steels for the customers. But if tomorrow the customer wants other materials, new materials, fiber reinforced polymers, composites, whatever, how can Tata Steel leverage the relationship that it has with those customers and help them with the new materials that they want to use, whether it's the railways, whether it's the automobile industry, whether the construction industry. So we should not be limited by the product that we are trying to sell. We should really be looking at what is it that the customer wants and how can we bring value to the customer. If it involves the material and the metal that we produce, that's perfect. If it isn't, then we need to really look at what else can we do to support the customer and also create an opportunity for ourselves. So the third point I want to talk about, again, very, very relevant for India, is utilization of low-grade raw materials, because even if I look at iron ore, India has high-quality iron ore. So you could just say, I will use high-quality iron ore, but there's a lot more iron ore which is in the ecosystem which you can use. If you look at coal, only 10% of India's coal is coking coal. So almost all the coking coal, about 55 million tons of coking coal is imported every year into India at huge foreign exchange outflow. And this is only going to grow. So how can we use low-grade materials? How can we be more innovative in the use of material? How can we be more resource efficient? And this is the third part of what I want to talk about. So as I said, coking coal currently is a very vital part of the blast furnace route of iron making. Is a valuable national resource. And this is especially true of our country, as we have the ambition to ramp up the steel production from the current level. If I leave out this year when production dropped because of the pandemic, but typically India produces about 105 million tons of steel. So we expect it to grow to about 300 million tons over the next 10, 12 years. And India's coal reserves, like I said, most of the coal India has is thermal coal. So can we find ways to replace coking coal with non-coking coal and help preserve valuable national resource and also save cost, save foreign exchange? And Tata Steel is exploring a number of routes, and these are areas for scientists and engineers to work on. Number of routes to enable coke from non-coking coal, and one of these routes uses polymeric resin together with the non-coking coal to replace coke. So again, this is an example of what you can do. There's a lot of work going on in Tata Steel on this, but I think when you look at the scientific community and the engineering community, when we pick the projects, and I'm glad that Dr. Sanak Mishra talked of defense, talked of rural. These are all areas of per capita consumption of metals or steel or anything in rural is 10% per capita, 10% of what it is in urban India. So how can we increase that? How can we substitute, different materials? For instance, again, we found great opportunity to substitute wooden doors with steel doors, which look like wooden doors. The aesthetics is like a wooden door, but the functionalities of a steel door. So these are again great opportunities, and in a country where there are a lot of termites, and termites is a problem, this is a great solution. So these are things that we need to work on. And as Dr. Sanak Mishra said, hydrogen, defense, rural, these are all certainly areas for us to look at. So continuing with the point on using low quality, making better use of low quality raw material. So on this polymeric resin together with non-coking coal to replace coke, it's been a case study for us on how to scale up an idea. This idea was taken from the laboratory through an upscale experimentation, a pilot scale testing before trying at hundreds of tons of scale in the plant. And we've taken knowledge of chemical engineering, design of equipment, development of vendors, and installation of new materials handling system to set this idea to produce value. And this has been successful in our Jamshedpur and in our Haldia coke plants. So we've been able to replace about 10% of the coking coal, which saves us hundreds of crores of rupees. So this is again an example of making better use of the materials that we have in hand to drive innovation and drive cost. Decarbonization, big issue. As I said, steel is a hard to abate sector. And if you really look at the steel making process. Fundamentally, like I said, today steel accounts for 7 to 8% of the carbon emissions in the world. It's a big emitter, like I said, because uh, coal is not just a source of energy, it's a reductant. And so it's not about substituting one energy source with another. You need to find another reductant if you want to really, find a substitute for coal. Because theoretically speaking, you can melt scrap using green energy and make steel with a very low carbon footprint. But there is not enough scrap in the world to melt to meet the requirements of the steel industry, customers. And secondly, not all the steels that the customers want, very high-end steels, cannot be made as yet through the scrap route. So scrap route will solve part of the problem, will not solve the whole problem. So the only way you can address the whole problem, and that's what steel companies, technologists are working on, is to say that how do one is find a way to get lots of hydrogen, which is green, cheap, available in plenty, and I find a way to use it in the process as a substitute for coal. And the other way is, can I capture the carbon which is coming out of the steel making process? Can I store it, sequester it, or can I use it? And here again, it calls for a lot of collaboration with multiple industries. If you want to store it, you could work with the oil and gas companies. We're doing some work in Europe because there are gas fields off the coast of Netherlands which can be used for storage. The Dutch government is creating an infrastructure to pipe out the carbon dioxide, but you also need to make sure that the quality of carbon dioxide is such that it can be stored and used. So that's one. Or you can work with chemical companies to say, how can I use a CO2 that is generated to make naphtha or something else. So these are opportunities that there are. So to me, as long as there are blast furnaces, there will be carbon-based reduction. And the solution to this route is to capture the CO2 using, say, some amine-based technologies. And amine technologies are today available at about 500 tons per day scale. And this is quite far away from the 43,000 tons per day scale that we need for a steel plant. But this is the only technology that is scalable today. So there's a lot of work going on in this. But, one thing to be kept in mind, we saw this in the discussion on the Bessemer process and how over a period of time the cost of steel came down. For large-scale use of all these options, one needs to look at the cost, because today any of these options on carbon capture, storage, or hydrogen is going to cost a steel company anything from $50 to $200 per ton. And that is more than the EBITDA margins of most steel companies in the world. So the key question is either you have to bring down the cost very significantly, and it can happen as you scale up or with some support from the government, or somebody has to bear the cost. Part of it will be borne by the industry, part of it will have to be supported by the government like they did for the renewable sector, and part of it will have to obviously be supported by the customers who should be willing to pay a premium for green steel if they are committed to this journey of sustainability. So I think these are the challenges that one needs to work with. And sequestration is an option, like I said, in places like Netherlands, where you may not be far away from gas fields where it can be stored. But if you look at a place like India, a lot of steel making coming up, I mean, it's not going to be very easy to find places to store. There is work going on globally on also saying that can you pipe it onto a ship which will carry it to some other place where it can be stored. So I can see that this is an area where there'll be a lot of work, a lot of innovation, a lot of technology solutions being sought. This is certainly an area where I would urge scientists and engineers to work on. A lot of companies are already working on. A lot of money is available globally to find solutions for these. These are areas where across value chains, vertically and horizontally, one can work together. Great opportunity for industry, academia, and engineers and scientists to work together. And these are going to be very, very relevant for countries like India, which is still in an early stage of development and has already made some we've made some very aggressive commitments for the future in terms of carbon reduction, and we'll be always under pressure to make more and more of those commitments. So I think this is a huge opportunity for technologists, engineers, scientists, academicians to really look at this area, not only for the benefit of the world, but also for the benefit of India. So when I look at the other option, as I mentioned, find a green alternative. The best way is hydrogen. In Europe, where grid electricity is mostly green through renewables, green hydrogen is generated using electrolysis. I think countries like Sweden, France, where a lot of the energy comes from green sources, that green could be hydel, could be even nuclear, whatever. Then you can use electrolysis, which is energy intensive, to make green hydrogen. Otherwise, you pretty much end up with what they call gray hydrogen or blue hydrogen, which again solves part of the problem, doesn't solve the whole problem. So India needs to find alternate routes to generating cheap green electricity. Biomass, chemical looping technology are two such options that Tata Steel is exploring. And cheap green hydrogen can be routed through the direct reduction route. Basically, in India is the biggest producer of coal-based DRI. Can we be the biggest producer of hydrogen-based DRI? But for that, you need hydrogen in plenty and cheap and green. So, and this DRI can be melted in an electric arc furnace, which again, if you have a green source of energy, then your carbon footprint is pretty much very, very minimal. This is what some people, SSAB, for instance, in Sweden is working on this. Use hydrogen, green hydrogen, make DRI, use it in an electric arc furnace where the energy source is green, and you have steel which is pretty much green. But it's not cheap, and so that's something that needs to be kept in mind. So when I look at what is the role that INA can play, just want to give two illustrations, two examples of what happened in China and in the US. Each of the, I don't know how many of you know, each of the founders of Lenovo was a member of the Institute of Computing Technology of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And the 200,000 yuan used as startup capital was approved by the then director of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And the Chinese Academy was one of the earlier shareholders of Lenovo. And the development of advanced material will certainly fuel many of the emerging industries. And yet the time it takes to move a newly discovered advanced material from the laboratory to commercial marketplace remains far too long. So the Materials Genome Initiative for Global Competitiveness was conceptualized in USA in 2011 to reduce the development time by providing the infrastructure and training that American innovators need to discover, develop, manufacture, and deploy advanced material in a more expeditious and economical way. And the National Academy of Sciences in the USA played a leadership role in this initiative. So, they've been active players in this. And I think there is, some sort of, I would dare say, inspiration or learning for us in this. So in line with what the Chinese and the American national academies have done, I wonder if INA should take visible leadership in several areas. And I was happy to hear Dr. Sanak Mishra's opening remarks, where he talked of many areas where INA is very active and very visible. And I think we need to do more and more of that. So again, some of the areas which I think are very, very important, while I refer to it in the context of the steel industry, it's important for the cement industry, important in general for India, which is even today looking at producing a lot of power, while the share of energy from coal is reducing. But given that the absolute requirements of energy in India will continue to increase, the absolute levels of coal may increase, even though its share is reducing. So unless we find good carbon utilization, storage and utilization solutions, we will have a challenge, at least for the next 30, 40 years. And this is an area for us to work on. Developing beneficiation technologies for upgrading and utilization of low-grade raw materials. Again, an area a lot of work can be done. I talked again of coal, but for instance, one of the areas we're working on is can we get nickel out of some of the chrome ore overburden that is there? Because India has a lot of chrome ore. India imports all the nickel that it uses, and nickel is going to become more and more important. And is there any way we can develop nickel indigenously? And these are areas for us to work on. And the third is, of course, how are we getting prepared for a more electrified world in some sense, where electrification is going on, the mobility solutions are getting electrified, battery technology, there's a lot of work going on, which also means that over a period of time, we need to get better and better at recycling electronic and battery waste. I mean, we are not even good at recycling steel, which is a very recyclable product. The ecosystem is being created. Tata Steel is also has created one of the first state-of-the-art recycling facilities in Rohtak for steel. But there's going to be more and more electronic and battery waste, and there are concepts like urban mining, etc., which are being discussed at length. So there is a lot of work that we need to do, and a lot of precious metal materials that we import can also come out of the recycling of the use of the finished products. So these are areas, some suggestions, some areas, but I'm sure with the kind of breadth and depth that we have at INE, I'm sure we can keep debating and come out with many more areas to work on, where we can do some pioneering work. So I thank you once again for inviting me. My privilege to be with all of you and to share some of the thoughts that I had based on the experience that we've had as an industry and the experience we have as Tata Steel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Pradeep, Vice President INAE, to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Our chief guest, Mr. T.V. Narendran, CEO and Managing Director, Tata Steel, Dr. Sanak Mishra, President, Indian National Academy of Engineering, Professor Indraneel Manna, and Professor Purnendu Ghosh, Vice Presidents, INAE, Professor K. Bhanushankar Rao, Chief Editor, Publications, INAE, esteemed Fellows of the Academy, distinguished invitees, young associates, recipients of the prestigious awards of the Academy, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my proud privilege to propose a vote of thanks today at the end of the inaugural session of the Indian National Academy of Engineering Annual Convention 2020, which is being organized as a virtual event, first time in the history of the Academy. First, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our chief guest, Mr. T.V. Narendran, for delivering his excellent, thought-provoking address on this occasion. I would also like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Sanak Mishra for delivering the presidential address. I thank all of you, all the fellows and young associates, invitees and other delegates who have made it a point to join us today. I also take this opportunity to invite all of you to please join us to celebrate the engineering accomplishments of our awardees in the afternoon session. President, Indian National Academy of Engineering will induct the new fellows, foreign fellows, and the young associates to our academy in the function to be held tomorrow morning. As you would have already noticed, we shall have the pleasure of listening to the exciting lectures by all our awardees this year, as well as all the fellows and the young associates being inducted into the academy this year during a 2 weeks program scheduled in January 2021. I very cordially invite all of you to please join us in all these sessions being organized as a part of the INAE annual convention spread over the next 4 weeks. I also take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to all the members of the INAE annual convention organizing committee consisting of Professor Indraneel Manna, Dr. Purnendu Ghosh, Professor K. Bhanushankar Rao, Mr. K. Ananthakrishnan, Mr. M.V. Kotwal, Professor Subhashish Chaudhary, Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee, and Lieutenant Colonel Shobhit Roy for their valuable inputs throughout and their kind help and support in organizing this annual event of our academy. I also gratefully acknowledge the valuable inputs received from Professor P. Sundar at IIT Bombay and Professor A.N. Rajgopalan at IIT Madras. I would also like to place on record my deep appreciation of the kind help and constant support provided by Mr. K. Ananthakrishnan, Chairman, and all the members of both the INAE Digital Platform Committee as well as INAE Digital Content and Webinars Committee in organizing our annual convention as a virtual event this year. I also gratefully acknowledge the valuable inputs and sustained help and support provided by Dr. Sanak Mishra, President INAE, Dr. B.N. Suresh, Immediate Past President INAE, Professor Indraneel Manna, and Dr. Purnendu Ghosh, Vice President INAE, and Professor K. Bhanushankar Rao, Chief Editor Publications INAE, in planning, organizing, and conduct of this national event in the wake of the innumerable challenges posed by the COVID pandemic in terms of logistics, technical and administrative support, and other unforeseen exigencies that have arisen from time to time. I would like to express our deep appreciation for the constant help, cooperation, and invaluable support provided by our colleagues in INA office, the dedicated staff members who have worked very hard under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Roy, Deputy Executive Director INAE, to organize our annual convention this year as a virtual event. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the members of the Indigo team for their kind assistance in the organization of this virtual event. I thank all of you, all the delegates who have joined us in today's inaugural function. Thanks a lot for your participation in the INAE Annual Convention 2020 and for making the event memorable and a grand success. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now break for lunch and rejoin after some time for the grand awards function. Meanwhile, please keep a watch on the timer screen. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for some engagement activity. We will be posing some questions in front of you and you have to answer them by typing the answer in the below chat box. We will be displaying the names of the winners in the end in the display. Ladies and gentlemen, let's see who is able to answer these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for me to pose some questions to you as the quiz competition is starting now. We have been listening to a lot of eminent speakers till now, but let's break the monotony and bring to you some interesting stuff. Let's see who the winner is. You have to answer these questions in the chat box below, and in the end we will be displaying the names of the winners. Let's see who are the lucky ones. So let us start with the first question of this quiz competition. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the first question is, what is the foundation day of INAE? Simple? Let's see who answers this. I was checking the chat box and a lot of people had actually answered correct. Ladies and gentlemen, the answer, as most of us got it right, is April 20th, 1987. Moving on to the next question. Ladies and gentlemen, when was INAE inaugurated and by whom? The question was, when was INAE inaugurated and by whom? And the correct answer is April 11th, 1988 by erstwhile Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. Ladies and gentlemen, the next question is, who was the first president of INAE? You have to answer in the chat box below. Let's see who is able to get this correct. Well, the previous question was pretty interesting about the first president of INA. Some people were able to answer it right. Let me give you the correct answer. Dear friends, the correct answer is the first president of INA was Professor J. Krishna. Moving to our next question. Dear friends, in which city, during which year, and with which organization, and who was the chief guest of the first Engineers Conclave? the answer to this tough question is the year 2013 in New Delhi, DRDO, by erstwhile President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee. Dear friends, it's time to move on to our next question. The next question is, in which year and where was the CAETS annual meeting and convocation held in India, and who is the only Indian citizen to have been elected as President of CAETS? Dear friends, the answer to my previous question is New Delhi, the year 2015, Dr. Baldev Raj. Time to move on to our next question, and this question is, name the President of INA who assumed office of President of India. I'm sure a lot of us know the answer already. Let's see who is able to answer. You have to answer in the chat box below. Dear friends, this was a very interesting question and a lot of us were able to answer it correctly. The answer is Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Dear friends, it's time for the next question in our quiz competition series. The question is, which fellows of INA were conferred the Bharat Ratna? The answer to my previous question is Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam and Dr. CNR Rao. Friends, it's time to move on to our next question. The next question in this quiz competition series is, name the recipients of the first Lifetime Contribution Award in Engineering in the year 1997. The answer to my previous question, dear friends, is Professor Satish Dhawan and Professor Jay Krishna. Moving on to our next question very quickly. The next question is, who were the first awardees of Satish Dhawan Chairs of Engineering Eminence? Dear friends, the answer to my previous question is, dear friends, we are getting some interesting answers. The question which I just asked has the answer, and the answer is Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan and Dr. Anil Kakodkar. The next question is, who is the oldest past president of INAE? friends, the answer to the oldest past president of INA, as a lot of us got it right, is Dr. S. Varadarajan. The next question now. Who is the immediate past president of INA? Pretty simple it is. Ladies and gentlemen, the question which I just asked about the immediate past president of INA has the answer Dr. B.N. Suresh. Let's move on to the next question, and the next question is, which president of INA has also held appointment of Secretary, Ministry of Earth Sciences and Chairman, Earth Commission? The answer to my question, which I just asked, is Dr. P.S. Goyal. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next question, and this questionnaire has so many interesting questions coming up. The next question is, who was the chief guest of the inaugural function of Engineers Conclave 2019? Let's see who gets the right answer. Gentlemen, the answer to this question about the previous year's chief guest of the conclave is Honorable Raksha Mantri Shri Rajnath Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now break for lunch and rejoin after some time for the grand awards function. Meanwhile, please keep a watch on the timer screen. Thank you.